The Will and Dave show is not recorded in front of a live audience. It's recorded in front of our computers alone because we're fucking lonely.
Yeah, guess what, kids? We are back. The Will and Dave Show, episode 31 is here on GlacierTV. It starts right now. And Dave, we're back!
Yeah, well, we're back and we're refreshed, and you went to Indy, and I got to watch all 3 races of the triple, and everything's gonna be great.
Yeah, a lot's happened since we were last on air. In fact, there's actually been 2 episodes that you guys will never get to hear. But we are actually officially back. It's the Will and Dave Show. Don't forget, on Twitter, you can follow us at Will and Dave Show. Facebook.com/Will and Dave Show. If you want to use one of those crazy hashtag things, it's Will and Dave. So you can do all that sort of stuff, and we will get this episode on iTunes as well, because we're back on iTunes as well, because Dave, we're fucking awesome. I can't say that, I'm an egotistical maniac, sorry.
Wait, we can't swear anymore?
No, I'm not allowed to say that we're awesome, because I'm an egotistical maniac, get it right. Yeah.
Wait, we're not, like, over that yet?
No, sorry, we're not.
You know what? There's a reason why the show is called Will and Dave, because we're fucking awesome, and we're great people, and everybody loves us except maybe 1 or 2, and we can do whatever we want, because we're just that good.
And we have at least 4 people listening to this every single week.
How many more people stream it and listen to it on iTunes? But
Yeah.
we don't pay the money to find out, so...
Yeah, we don't pay the money to find that one out at all. So we have got a lot to talk about. And when I say a lot, I mean an absolute lot of shit to talk about. We've got what? Formula 1 stuff. We've got IndyCar stuff. We've got NASCAR stuff. We might even talk about MotoGP, Le Mans, basketball, of course, because the Pacers suck. We never actually talked about the NFL and Johnny Manziel coming to your hometown.
Oh, yes.
So,
We also have the adventures of Will Vincent in America.
yeah, where I'm going to tell you now, I didn't get laid.
Well, at least you didn't bring all those condoms like last year, right?
No, I didn't. And also, you know me very well. I don't date stupid. I don't fuck stupid.
There's a lot of things to be said to that, but I'm just going to move on.
Yeah, that's why I'm never going to sleep with RN.
With who?
RN.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, first part is, well, you know, hey, he's got some pretty nice double B cups going on there, so if you get really pissed drunk one time, you'll slip up a little bit. Hey, black t-shirts can't even hide them.
Yeah, true story that. We will start not with IndyCar, like everyone's going to expect to do, but with Formula 1, because this whole thing of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, I tell you what, I like it. It's just like going back 20 years and thinking about Senna and Prost.
Oh, Will, I love it because of the fact that, let's face it, Mercedes is going to have the Constructors' Championship wrapped up by Monza. So, at least you've got 2 guys on pretty equal footing who, as of right now, seems like either one of them could win any week. It's not like, you know, back in the days when, you know, Prost was at Williams and his teammate was like Ricardo Patrese or something like that. You know, they can keep up with each other. They can put the pressure on each other. They can make each other break. And Nico Rosberg has the edge after Monaco. Did he slip up on purpose or not?
Well,
Hamilton seems to think so. Stewart's
it was
thought
very
not.
similar to 2006 at Monaco with Schumacher, to be fair, and I think that's what Hamilton was thinking of at the time. But at the same time, we're going to a track which is Hamilton's best track in many ways, which is Canada, next weekend. So you talk about the momentum being on Rosberg's foot. I actually think it's the other way around. It's now Hamilton's momentum, and you look at the mid-season as well. We've got, you know, Canada. Then at some point we've got the British Grand Prix as well, which is a pure, I mean, everyone's going to be cheering for Hamilton. And the German fans, yes, they were cheering for Rosberg, but you don't get that hometown advantage in Germany, I think the same way you get in the UK.
Well, I have to argue a little bit against you thinking that Hamilton has the edge going into Montreal. Yes, it's a good track for him, but at the end of the day, Rosberg had the pole, had the most points, won the race, and just totally deflated Hamilton. Yeah, they said they've talked and they're friends again. But wait till next week, and then it'll be off again, especially if it's really close. And like they were saying, the guys were even going as far as running engine settings that the team told them they weren't supposed to run, just to try to keep an edge or step over the line a little bit. So this is far from done. I don't think anybody has momentum right now, but I think Rosberg is in Hamilton's head, and if he doesn't go out and win at Canada this next race, then I think the doubts will start to grow in Hamilton's mind, and we know that Hamilton is a bit emotional.
Yeah.
As shown with the Alonso-Hamilton rivalry back in his rookie year, where they both pissed it away and let Raikkonen win the championship. Yeah. So we know that that's not going to happen. We know a third party is not going to come in and win the championship this year, bar some sort of miracle from maybe Red Bull. But it's between the two of them, and it's only a matter of time before somebody gains a significant edge, I would think.
And you talk about the emotion part of that as well, and going back to the whole Senna versus Prost thing, Nico Rosberg clearly is the Alain Prost in this conversation, and Lewis Hamilton, before we get past the fact his helmet colours yellow, is the Ayrton Senna in this argument. And I'm not going to say that Hamilton's as good as Senna or that Rosberg's as good as Prost, but really you've got the two perfect roles, because Rosberg can outthink Hamilton, but I think that Hamilton, on his day, can outdrive Rosberg.
Yeah, completely agree there. Hamilton's a brute force. Just drive it in there as hard as you can and hope it all works out. Rosberg's, gaining valuable points. He's pushing, but he's trying not to overstep things whenever possible. And, believe what you want at Monaco, but if he was able to get away with purposely going off track and causing a yellow, which allowed Hamilton to not complete his qualifying run at full speed, therefore giving himself the pole, well, then that's definitely outthinking.
And yeah, you go back to 1984 as well, which actually before that, those two were teammates, Senna and Prost. You had that whole controversial thing with Alain Prost getting pretty much the marshals to wave the red flag to end the Monaco Grand Prix. And 30 years later, it seems to have come full circle with teammates and friends not being teammates and friends, so on. And it's a great story in F1. And you are right as well that we kind of needed it, because this season would have been shite otherwise, because Vettel's too busy, crying about the fact that there's an Australian driver going faster than him. The Lotus drivers have no money. The Williams drivers, are good but inconsistent. And essentially, you've got a mixture of Force India and McLaren and Williams and occasionally a Sauber, who's, I'd say competition, but you can't even say that.
Hey, let's not forget Marussia. They even after all the penalties, scored their very first points.
Yep.
And
wait.
Will Vincent's happy. He said that Marussia was going to score points first, and that pretty much put the final nail in Caterham's coffin, don't you think?
I did call it, that Marussia was going to get points first over Caterham, and you have to say they did do a good job at Monaco. And it's that whole thing that historically, if you want to get points, Monaco is one of probably only two tracks where you can get it. Marussia got the job done. Yes, they have about as few sponsors as McLaren these days, but they got the job done.
Yeah, they did, and they finished ahead of some pretty significant competition. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you got there. It's that you managed the race well enough to put yourself in the position to collect the points. And they did a great job. I hope that turns things around for them. They were able to beat Caterham last year, even though neither of them scored points. They did have the higher finish. And now they've got momentum to build on. They think that they can challenge Sauber, and if they're able to continue as they are, I can't see why they can't score more points this year at tracks that, Monaco, it's like, if a bunch of guys fall out, you're going to score points if you stay in it. They got a shot at scoring points at tracks where that's not the case.
Weren't they the one that was actually going to try and sell themselves as well? So from a sales point of view, they've actually increased themselves. And Caterham, I think, is in a bit of a tough situation that they've not really caring about F1 that much. They're kind of there, they're not doing much, but their development cycle's been rubbish. And I think Marussia has really become the new Minardi in many ways.
Yeah, they've kind of filled that final grid spot points-wise. It'll be interesting to see if, I know you're a big Minardi fan. Let's see if in the coming seasons, if they do stick around, if maybe they can come up with some creative outside the box thinking to, propel themselves a little farther up the grid.
But we have to say, overall, the Monaco Grand Prix as a race, except for the whole Lewis Hamilton and Rosberg thing, was kind of boring.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the last couple years have been lacking drama. I do remember a few years ago, I don't remember exactly which year it was. What was it? Vettel, blanking on his teammate now. Weber.
Yeah, there was
Weber
a year as well when Hamilton
what was it? The
had
three of them
failure and all that shit happening to him.
No, wasn't it like the three? There was three cars like all on top of each other, and then there was a huge crash in front of them, and the rules allowed for tire changes, and that kind of ruined the rest of the race.
Yeah, it's like they had a red flag. Was it a red flag or a safety car?
It was a red flag.
Yeah, and the way that the rules worked was just completely bullshit and allowed Vettel to actually do well in that race, which was horrible. And this shows how little we care about the Monaco Grand Prix compared to the Indy 500 because we just don't remember it.
Well, there were no passes for the lead. It's a tight track. I mean, it's historical. It's never really going to provide good racing. It's the show. It's the yachts in the harbor. It's the hot chicks, sunbathing while the race goes on 3 feet away from them, but they're 50 feet up in the air on the roof of a fancy building and all this stuff. So it's a glitz and glamour end of Formula One. It's not the gritty, duke it out Bahrain style racing for sure.
And I always say that Monaco Grand Prix is the sex of motorsports. Then you have the Indy 500, which is the racing of motorsports, and then you have the Coke 600, which is the time that you put on the barbecue and you just chill out, really.
There was plenty of time to chill out in the Coke 600. There really wasn't a lot going on unless you were a Harvick or a Johnson fan, because if it wasn't for those two, there wasn't really anything else going on.
But let's talk about the 500. And we'll start off. We have to start off with that three-wide pass, and that three-wide crash even with Carpenter and Hinchcliffe and Townsend Bell. Now, I saw this live. I saw it on TV again. I don't get where Carpenter's coming from because that was all Townsend Bell's fault, in my opinion.
Well, I could completely disagree with you 110%. Hinchcliffe was the last car in the scene. If it was just going to be Townsend Bell and Carpenter going into turn 1, Carpenter takes the inside lane, Townsend Bell holds the outside, they make it work. But when Hinchcliffe tried to make it 3 wide, there was nowhere for Carpenter to go. And luckily, the high line worked, or Townsend Bell was able to kind of just drive through it. Hinchcliffe dove in there at the last second. Carpenter wasn't expecting him to make it 3 wide.
He was going to
Yeah, but he was taking the arc into the corner with a guy on the outside of him. I mean, 3 wide is never going to work in Indy without a huge apron on the bottom.
No, it is going to work at Indy, and they've done it before. In fact, they had 3 wide at that race. Stop listening to Scott Goodyear and actually pay attention to real life, because they did 3 wide and they worked it early in the race.
Well, when James Hinchcliffe is diving it in Takuma Sato style, it's not going to work. And unfortunately, it took out a really good car in Carpenter, and Townsend Bell was able to get away with it. But all that bumping and banging screwed his car up, and he ended up crashing on his own later in the race.
Yeah.
But as I see it, if Hinchcliffe didn't dive in there, and it was just Carpenter and Townsend Bell, there wouldn't have been no wreck. Those two would have been fine. And then, coming out of 2, who knows what would have happened? Hinchcliffe could have made some passes or whatever.
Well,
we'll never know because that's not what happened.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost argue that actually it was Carpenter's spotter who was the one to blame in all that.
Now, are we going to get into the spotters trying to be soothsayers and estimate if, I think Hinchcliffe's going to try to pass you here. In the amount of time you try to say that, he's already there.
Yeah.
And Hinchcliffe said he was the last one on the scene. He kind of took partial blame for it. Townsend Bell had nothing to do with it. Him and Carpenter knew what they were getting into in the turn 1. They were side by side from the start-finish line down into turn 1. They knew, hey, it's between the two of us. Townsend Bell had no idea Hinchcliffe was going to make it 3 wide. So anybody who blames Townsend Bell for that wreck, I think needs to have their head checked.
Well, I need to.
Yes,
have my
that means
head
you.
checked then. Yeah.
Yes, that means you, Will.
Oops. Of course, I'm the egotistical maniac, so of course I had to have my head checked. But before we had that, we had 149 laps of green flag running. Before we had that, we had a bit of Indy history because it was the first time since 1954 that anyone outside the Holman George family gave the command. Jim Neighbors gave the command alongside Mary Holman George that race. And you have to say, there's no mark of respect that IndyCar could have given to Jim Neighbors except for giving him the command for the Indy 500.
I thought that was a very fitting tribute to a man who sung back home again in Indiana with such passion and dedication. Even when his health has not been its greatest, he always did his best to make it there every year and to add to the tradition of the Indy 500 and to allow him to share in the Gentlemen Start Your Engines. I don't think you could show him any more respect than allowing him to give that command.
It was Pippa Man and Gentlemen Start Your Engines. Get it right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Well, everybody knows what I mean. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
purposely disrespect the female gender.
But you know, those first 149 laps, it was really good. And I have to say, when you actually have a look at that race had everything you almost asked for it. You know, 149 laps, green flag running, the fastest 300 miles in the history of motorsports. Then you had the cautions, then you had the red flag, then you had the 6-lap shootout. I mean, the 500, and of course you got to include the fact that, you know, you had the casual NASCAR fans watching with Kurt Busch being in there. That race pretty much had everything it needed from it.
Yeah, there was a ton of strategical things going on in the first 150 laps. It was interesting to see how teams were trying to, play things out. There was a lot less passing for the lead because nobody wanted the lead because they're playing the strategy game.
It was also damn hot as well. That was one of the big issues compared to
Yes.
last year. Last year was really cold, which meant that, it's a lot easier to pass. This year was a lot hotter, and, well, you've seen the photo of how hot it was, seeing my skin. I got sunburnt, and I'm black, partially.
Yeah, that just shows you how much the sun was beating down on the track that a black man could get tanned or even sunburned. So, anyway, stepping away from the racial jokes, yeah, the race had everything you could have asked for. And I don't think ABC gave enough credit to Kurt Busch for the job that he did in the race. He took it real easy to start, started 12th, he fell back as far as 20th, I believe. He kept digging and kept him in it with a pretty secure car. I'm sure if it was somebody else in the race, I'm sure the car probably would have had less aero on it. But they trimmed the car out in the final stop and took the blindfold off, as Kurt said, and let him have at it, and he was able to get up there to 6th. I mean, that's a great drive for somebody who had never been in the IndyCar race before. They're on the biggest stage in racing as their first race, and knowing that he had another 600 potential miles to go after that, not let any of that weigh on his mind, and to finish 6th in his first IndyCar race at the Indianapolis 500 with all the conditions going on and the strategy. I mean, how easy could it have been for Kurt Busch on his first green flag pit stop to totally biff that and just be out of it completely?
How many times has Will Power done it? And he's been in the series
And
for
he
over
did it
5
again.
years.
And he did it again.
Precisely.
And Juan Montoya did it again. Yeah. Speeding penalties at the Brickyard are not Juan Montoya's friend. It possibly has cost him a Brickyard 400 victory and an Indy 500 win.
Yeah, and Will Power once again choked when it came to a big oval race. But I agree with the ABC thing, but only to an extent, because I think that ABC could have done the same thing that Fox has done with Danica and literally rammed it down your throat, and they didn't. And yes, they didn't give enough props to Kurt Busch. And actually, I was reading a Q&A on IndyStar a couple of days after the race, and someone made a very good point that actually Kurt Busch, he would have probably had a 10th place car at best, considering all circumstances, thing with Carpenter, thing with Townsend Bell, with Hinchcliffe, etc. He would have had probably struggling to get into the top 10. But he probably would have done it, to be fair, because he probably would have raced harder had he actually got, had been in that situation. But you're right, to get a NASCAR driver into IndyCar was a great job to get himself a P6 finish. And he did everything that IndyCar needed from him. He didn't win the race, which is good, because if he won the race, it would have been the whole thing, NASCAR drivers are better than IndyCar drivers, which means that Donovan McNabb would have called IndyCar drivers non-athletes as well. But
who gives a crap what Donovan McNabb thinks?
But at the same time, he finished well, and of course, you know that we, the iRacing community, had ourselves the opportunity to do a garage tour with Ganassi on Carb Day. And one of the key things that stood out for me was I asked a question about whether there's going to be any other drivers that does it. Kyle Larson apparently wants to do the double. How amazing would that be?
Well, imagine if several drivers tried to do it at once. I mean, that would be incredible. Kyle Larson could definitely pull it off. That guy shows that every car he gets into, he's fast and he's fearless, and he's young enough where he don't know any better.
Yeah.
I would be more interested to see if an IndyCar guy tries to hook up with a decent NASCAR team. You know, Stewart would throw somebody in a car for the Coke 600. I'd like to see it. I would like to see an IndyCar guy try to go the other way, because we don't ever see that.
That's an interesting point, actually, because I think it's my feeling.
They hate jet dryers.
Yeah, they hate jet dryers. It's my feeling that you probably get the entire Stuart Haas team attempt to qualify for the 2016 Indy 500. Danica might not make it, but you probably get Happy Harvick, you'd get Kurt, you'd get Tony Stewart, all running the 100th anniversary of the 500. And you've got to remember here that Stewart Indy means a lot to him, and I think that if he wouldn't do it in a year because he needs to lose a bit more weight to do so, but I think Stewart wants to do it, and I think Harvick would go with him, Danica would go back, so there's 4 guys, and you've got to argue that as part of the return deal, you'd put someone in to run it into a 5th NASCAR driver.
Well, don't forget, there was always that real quiet little rumor that I heard in Indy last year from a friend of both of ours that said that Harvick had tried to attempt running the Indy 500 Coke 600 double with Panther, but things didn't quite shake out because Chevy rejected the notion of Harvick driving in the then Honda-powered Panther car. From who the source is, I tend to believe it's true. I was actually lucky enough to ask Harvick the question on Twitter. He was randomly answering questions on Twitter one night, and I tweeted him and I said, "Evan, any truth to the rumor you attempted the Indy 500 with Panther?" And he said no. Of course he's going to say no because it didn't come out like that. But, man, that would be interesting.
It would be. I've got a list of drivers, actually, and, I don't like... I don't like Kyle Busch, but to see Kyle Busch running the Indy 500 would be interesting, to say the least, as well. I don't think you'd ever get anyone from the Hendrick camp going, because Hendrick are purely NASCAR. I'm sure the NASCAR brass would do something to make sure they wouldn't do it. You can almost say the same thing for the rest of the Joe Gibbs team. If Joe Logano is ever to go to the Indy 500, I would punch him at the face and not allow him through the door. But there are, I think, about 5 or 6 drivers who, in theory, could do it in the next 2 years or so. And it will be great for IndyCar.
It would also be great to see more than 33 entries to the 500 so you can have a legitimate bump day. And what I'd also like to see is the Indy 500 have its own rules. Like we've been saying for a long time, we don't need 2,000-mile engines running the Indy 500. The Indy 500 should be its own race. You can put whatever engine you want in it within the rules. It doesn't have to run 6,000 miles and 10 different test sessions. Let's open this thing up a little bit.
Well, yeah, and that's a whole thing that I think would get long-term investment in IndyCar. Now, we've talked about this before, that a certain old friend of mine was talking about how Ferrari, for example, has an engine which they were going to put into an LMP car, which is also directly transferable into an IndyCar. Now, I think that with the stories, for example, of Ford wanting to do a run at Le Mans, and also Honda wanting to go into Le Mans in an LMP1 car, I think a lot of that transfers back over. You get a Ferrari into IndyCar, get more development of the Honda car, which will help boost Chevy's, participation in IndyCar up a little bit as well. Get, Ford said they're not going to run the IndyCar, but they might run the 500. Can you imagine? It wouldn't be a Porsche, I don't think, either. You'd probably get it badged as a VW or something. But one of that kind of types of cars in there as well. It'd be phenomenal.
Anytime you can get more manufacturers involved at Indy is only going to help its cause. And if you can get it done by the 100th running of it, man, I already want to go to that one. That would just increase my excitement tenfold.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, we've got the driver thing sorted out. Now, we're never going to get an F1 driver ever since the Monaco Grand Prix. And this is actually one of those things as well. That
it's possible.
Well, yeah, because let's not forget, the Monaco Grand Prix didn't used to be held on Memorial Day weekend. It was always, the Monaco Grand Prix is always kind of the week after the Cannes Film Festival. And the thing with that, actually, was the scheduling of the film festival to the Monaco Grand Prix, which has always been the biggest issue, not the fact it's a Memorial Day weekend. So, there is a chance, but do you really think you'd get an F1 driver over?
No, their contracts are way too limited. Yeah. Look at Kimi Räikkönen was talking, I think a week or so ago, saying that he was jealous of the old school drivers about how often they were able to get into other, racing vehicles and, just go at it. No, John, we don't want Pastor Maldonado at Indy. He'd wreck the whole field he'd wreck the whole field.
Maldonado and EJ Vito running in the same team together. That would just basically boost the U.S. economy tenfold.
Yeah, Dallara would make a lot of money too, having to replace all those busted chassis. Anyways, yeah, they're too limited. But however, the Monaco Grand Prix does not always fall Memorial Day weekend. It's based off of the week after a French holiday, which sometimes fluctuates in the year depending, how things go. Like Memorial Day was quite early. Well, like how on Memorial Day is like this year's Memorial Day in the United States was early in the calendar month.
Well,
now in a couple of years, the Indy 500 will
one
be
day, and they only changed that, about 30 years ago to make it so that it was a specific day. The same with Thanksgiving. So, you're right. There is very little standardization between the Monaco Grand Prix date and, of course, because of the French festivals and all the strikes and all that sort of stuff, and, the rest of the schedule. So there is a possibility, but you are right. For example, F1 drivers, Jack Brabham, for example, he lost his life a couple of weeks ago. He ran 4 times in the Indy 500. And the ironic thing was, actually, the second that they took the Indy 500 out of the F1 schedule, we had more F1 drivers running in it.
Yeah, well, that's what's that all about? But well, it helped that the Indy 500 could have literally been run on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Depending on when the holiday fell, so that made it a lot easier. You could go run the Indy 500 and then, go to Monaco or wherever the race was on Sunday.
Well, yeah, no, of course, traditionally the Indy 500 was run on a Monday, not on a Sunday as well. Back in the day. This is how much we know about the Indy 500. That we know that it used to be run on a Monday. Fuck you, people who hate us.
Well, Vincent, you know so much about American history and when the holidays were and stuff. When are you gonna move here and give up this socialist Republic of Great Britain?
It's in the works. It's in the works. Trust me. Long term, everyone knows it's my aim. It is my aim, and I actually found out if I get a doctorate, it makes it a lot easier for me to get into the country. So that means I can stay in education for 5 more years, still be a student, go to all the frat parties, and then afterwards move to America.
Well, did I read correctly that you had to prove that you were a sim commentator to get into the United States or something?
You know what the TSA
couldn't just
are like.
come. You couldn't just come here for pleasure.
Well, you know what the TSA are like, and of course, when you come from the UK to America, you have to basically tell them where you're staying for your first day. Not the entire time, but where you're going to stay for your first date. And because I was staying at one of my friend's house, I was told, I was asked, well, why are you staying here? How do you know sim racers? I was like, well, I'm a sim racing commentator, this, that, and the other. The guy actually made me commentate to actually get into the country. And it's that ironic thing. The TSA will make you do anything you want them to do. And you just
So what did you do?
I commentated.
Well, what did you commentate on? A race in your head?
I commentated if I was commentating the start of the Indy 500.
Would you like to give us a little taste?
Pace car to make itself out of turn number 4, and ladies and gentlemen, the 98th running of the Indianapolis 500 starts right now!
What did he say after you gave him that little bit?
He didn't say anything, he stamped my thing and let me go.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Alright, Will, we've talked about the 500, we talked about, we're getting near the end of the race. You're in the pits. How did that all play out for you?
It was hot, but it's actually pretty cool. Actually, I was able to go down on pit road during the race, and we didn't realize then that we basically had 2 pit passes between 3 of us. So we were swapping between us, and we didn't realize we could actually go on for the grid as well. They tried kicking us out. We didn't realize that we just need to ask them nicely to get some little ribbons put onto our passes, and therefore we could have gone on for the race. So we got on for the race. And I was at the Ganassi pit crew when, was it Dixie? No, TK, when he had his issue.
The transmission problem?
Yeah. And I was also there when the National Guard car had its issue. Oops. So basically, don't ever let me down to your pit stall because I'm going to ruin your entire
you were
race.
in Townsend Bell's pit, too.
Yeah.
And look how his race turned out.
So in other words, don't ever let me come down your pit because otherwise I'm going to ruin your race. And of
You
course,
should have gone straight to Elio's pit.
I did. That's why he didn't win. I went to Hinchcliffe's pit to try and find, the person that everyone always wants to see in that pit wall.
Wait, the United Fiber Data Girls?
Yeah, they weren't there, unfortunately. They were doing some marketing thing at that time. But Hinch was out the race after that. I didn't go to Ryan Hunter race pit stall, surprisingly enough.
Oh, that's why he won, because you didn't visit.
So Ryan Hunter Ray, no, sorry, I'm being too egotistical again. But yeah, it was cool. And we had, I had seats. Actually, I was sitting with a guy called Gary Kitchell, who many people will know as the father of Mike Kitchell, who is the director of communications for IndyCar. Now, our tickets actually fell through 48 hours before the race because they all thought, oh, okay, now Kitch is, where he is in IndyCar, you don't need these tickets anymore. So we didn't have any tickets until the last minute. We got some sorted out. We actually sat with the ABC supply people. So we were right there with Takuma Sato's lot.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a good race. And I have to say, that race overall was one of the better 500 I've ever seen. The only thing I'm pissed off about is how all of the networks were saying it was a close finish. It wasn't a close finish.
Also, yeah, it wasn't a close finish. But when you look at the stopwatch and they see 0.06 seconds, oh my god, so close! But it was, you know what? It wasn't a close finish, but it was a damn close battle. And Ryan Hunter-Reay's got balls of steel to try to fake to the outside, dive to the inside on the back straightaway, almost hit the grass, and make the move stick to take the lead at that one point.
That was a great pass, to be fair. And also, you've got to remember as well that I think that Elio had too much downforce on his car. Because it was very easy for Hunter-Reay to get past Elio. It was a lot more difficult for Cashman Evans to get past Ryan Hunter-Reay.
Now, have you watched the whole race?
Yeah.
You hear the comment that Ryan Hunter-Reay said that he thought he had an advantage in some way, shape, or form, but he didn't want to discuss it.
That was
you hear that?
Downforce.
Well, I'm not sure if that's what it was, because
he said the fact that Elio had, too many dollars in his pocket that he didn't pay the tax.
Well, someone asked him on Twitter about that. They said, "What? So you want to talk about the advantage?" He goes, "No, because I want to use it next year." Do you think he was manipulating the in-car tools to give himself some sort of advantage, or do you think it's a little more mundane than that? Come on, just because I mentioned the in-car tools doesn't mean I'm Scott Goodyear. Now, this is what the roll bar does. How come he didn't talk about the roll bars at Detroit today? I don't remember him saying it.
No, he didn't. He didn't mention the anti-roll bars or the weight jacket at all.
And by the way, Eddie Cheever is obsessed with Russians.
He really is. It's like, I'm sure he's going to actually get himself a mail order as bride, to be fair. But if you're ABC and you're listening to this, then please don't sue me for libel. But yeah, you're right. And I think there is something that the Andretti team have figured out because they were so good this year at the 500. And I think it's something that the entire team found out. And I don't think it's necessarily in-car tools. I think it's something on the setup they found out because they have been pretty darn good on ovals, full stop. And I think that because ever since they moved to Honda, I think whatever they found out just amplified itself and how it works. Because we all need to remember that the Honda engine isn't as naturally good as the Chevrolet engine.
Yeah, this is true. And that's kind of what surprised me about the move Andretti Autosport going to Honda, that, everybody seemed to think that engine was a little weaker than the Chevy, so why would you switch? But obviously it paid off for the Indy 500.
So yeah, good race, of course. And of course, one thing we haven't talked about is the fact it's the first American winner since 2006 and Sam Hornish Jr. And also the fact that Fox Sports Live and SportsCenter led off with the Indy 500, which is, as an IndyCar fan, really good for me.
Well, this could be a definite turning point in the upswing for IndyCar and the continual decline of NASCAR. When you compare a 600-mile race at Charlotte with the Indy 500, the only comparison we can make was it was automobiles on an oval track. I mean, Indy 500 completely blew away the Coke 600, and I am a 25-year NASCAR fan. I did not watch Indy since the split, so I did not watch an Indy 500 from after 95 till about 2008. That's how pissed off I was at IndyCar. And I used to be a huge IndyCar fan as a kid. My dad watched IndyCar more than NASCAR. And I'm a full believer that when I went to the IndyCar race at Mid-Ohio back in 2010, and I saw it in action, that was really the first IndyCar race I watched full, was when I was there in person. They converted me that day, and I've been slowly watching more and more people switch ever since. And I think IndyCar can regain its status as the number one motorsport in America if they kind of open up the spec rules a little bit. Right. Because we all know that spec series don't have success. That's why NASCAR is failing at the moment, because it's basically all the same cars doing all the same things.
So basically we need IndyCar to do what they said they would do 2 years ago and actually allow aero kits, for example.
Yes,
which apparently is coming for next year.
The more they can do to open things up and allow teams and engine manufacturers and whoever else to tinker and play with things to give themselves an advantage, hey, more power to them, and it's only going to make things better, I think.
One of the interesting things as well is the ratings for the race, because IndyCar got a 4.0 rating. Now, NASCAR got a 4.0 rating as well, but NASCAR got about 1 million more views. It's basically because market rating shares is basically how many people has a TV on at that point. Then they compare it with how many people was watching a race. So NASCAR did beat IndyCar in the ratings, but the rating number is the first time that those two have been equal since about 2008, which is actually kind of important for IndyCar and a long-term thing. So it'll be really interesting to see actually what the ratings are for Detroit, because I think that's one of those things that will help the momentum in the longer term. Detroit race today, though, was kind of messy, to be fair. But not messy in the sort of way we saw at St. Pete and the Indy Grand Prix, in which, basically, the series was made to be a bit of a joke at times. More the fact that, people are crashing because that car can be hard to drive.
Yeah, well, it was messy, but not in the sort of dangerous, irresponsible, bad racing kind of messy. It was just, this is how difficult this Detroit track is. And Eddie Cheever did make a good point.
Oh my God.
You won't hear me say this too much. They talked about the brutal winter in the Midwest and Northeast, and how freaking cold it was, and how there was still snow on the ground in Detroit on April 15th. You know how much that concrete probably heaved over that whole winter, just, being minus 20 degrees, 50, minus 10, or being that cold that long. So that track was even bumpier than they remembered last year. And I mean, look at Mike Conway, won one of the duels last year, won earlier this year, and the track just grabbed him and pulled him into the fence. I mean, A guy like that usually doesn't make mistakes like that, and that's how difficult this track was. He had strategy plays, and look at Will Power. I mean, he certainly didn't pass 18 cars to come from 19th on the grid to win the race on the track. He did it with pit strategy, and because there were so many cautions from, the track reaching out and biting guys.
And the coverage, though, was shit.
Of course it was. It was ABC, but there's nothing we can do about that.
No, I mean, we kind of want ABC to broadcast races. We just don't want any of the people doing it to do it.
Here's the thing, Will. ABC has been horribly covering IndyCar racing since the early 90s. So it doesn't matter who's broadcasting on ABC. It's the fact that whoever is in control of ABC's broadcasting, they just do a terrible job. I mean, for Christ's sakes, why do they have a S&M themed thing going on for the Indy 500 and how important the milk was? I mean, that was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And for God's sakes, oh, look at Ilio Castroneves' girlfriend with 2 laps ago. No one gives a damn about the girlfriend freaking out. Everybody knows that
That's a tradition from many years
my
ago.
boyfriend might win the Indy 500. You think the girlfriend might be excited just a little bit? That's a no freaking
She just knows
brainer.
she's
And
gonna
when the
get laid
race is
that
over,
night.
Will, when the race is over, don't interview the wife. Maybe you should interview somebody.
1, 2, 3. I can count. Yeah.
Interview somebody who actually had a freaking job on the team. Hey, how about the strategist, a mechanic? How about the guy who holds the freaking pit sign? He had more to do with that win than the wife. The wife just sat there and watched.
Sign because they don't have them anymore, remember?
So somebody had to hold the sign into the pit road.
Oh,
somebody has to hold
road,
it.
Yes, because they banned the people who held the signs on the racetrack, which actually one of my friends got caught out of because that was his job for Graham Rahal Racing, whatever they called. Rahal, Lanigan, Latterman, Littling, whatever racing.
Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan.
That's the one. But yeah, you're right. And that whole thing over the girlfriend thing was something that used to go back to the 70s and 80s. And of course, ABC has done the 500 for 50 years now. And I think they've not really realized that things move on.
No, they haven't. You know what? I get that you want to interview the wife. She's going to be all excited. Usually a pretty face. But interview somebody who means something first. I mean, come on. Don't you think the strategist or the chief mechanic or somebody maybe had something to do with that win or made a strategy call or something?
I always think when they do the girlfriend, they might as well just put a caption underneath it saying, "Gonna get laid tonight." There we are. Shall we move on to NASCAR?
No, not yet. I think I want to hear some Will Vincent Indy stories. I saw a picture on Facebook of you chasing Ilio Castroneves in the pits, and that son of a bitch was running away from you. What happened? Well, why would anybody want to run away from Will Vincent?
Everyone was a bit of a cock the entire weekend, to be fair. And you know what people used to say about Danica? How she would always be nice and smiley when the cameras were on, but when the cameras were turned off, she would be an absolute bitch. Elio is exactly the same.
Oh, freaking man, I could tell you that. Eric Vanek could tell you that. Al Nagy can tell you that. We've been going into the Mid-Ohio IndyCar races for years, and we're in the autograph line every single year, or in the pits, or wherever. And every time we see this guy, if there's not a camera on him, he's a total dick. We were in line one year, and everyone else is saying hello to us or thanks when we say, thanks for coming out or whatever. Trying to be nice to him. Ilio's got his head down, just signing stuff. He doesn't even know what he's looking at. He's trying to talk to other people. He just completely ignores people unless you got huge boobs. And then the TV person, oh, hey, thanks for being here. I'm so excited. Let me climb your fence.
Yeah. And I have to say that I was really disappointed of Elio, to be fair, because all the other drivers were really nice. I mean, not only all the other current drivers, I mean, Dario was there. Dario was nice as hell. Jim Neighbors did a 2-hour signing, and we all remember how his health isn't as good as it should be. And Rick Mears was just wandering around, not just pit road. He was wandering around Gasoline Alley the entire racetrack. This is a 4-time Indy 500 winner. He's got one more win than Elio, and he's a nicer person.
I walked up to Rick Mears at Mid-Ohio 2 years ago, and I wasn't even looking for an autograph. He was just sitting there on the bike. I was like, Rick, and he looked at me. I'm like, man, I just want to shake a 4-time Indy 500 winner's hand. And he stuck his hand out to me, and I said, thank you. And I shook his hand. I said, you're the man. He said, I really appreciate that. And then he rode his scooter off. I mean, that guy's a 4-time Indy 500 champion, Oval Master, doesn't know who I am, never will know who I am. And he gave me 5 seconds of his time so I could shake an Indy 500 winner's hand. And he thanked me for telling him he was the man. I mean, and then I saw Al Unser Jr. got his. He was excited to sign my autograph. He walked by so many fans, and all the newer fans had no idea who this was. It's like, dude, this guy's won the Indy 500 2 times, closest Indy 500 finish winner ever. And he's just walking by people that had no idea who they were. Me and Eric were like, Al, can we get your autograph? And he's like, yeah, guys, what's going on? And he was talking to us like, hey, you want to go have a beer or something? Maybe not a good example, but like that. And then you got Ilio Castroneves, who on a Friday morning, nothing's going on. They haven't even hit the track yet. Hey, what's happening? I'll just blow you off. You don't exist. I'm too big. I was on Dancing with the Stars and Wife Swap and all this shit.
Hey, on camera again. Hey, how you doing, guys?
You don't have boobs. I'm not paying attention to you.
But I actually saw Roger Penske as I was leaving, and he was in his car. And the thing is, you know, if you're Roger Penske after you just lost the Indy 500, I would black my windows out. But he was there, window down, talking to fans on the way out. And I actually said to him, you know what? Don't be disappointed with yourself. You came P2. And he was a really nice guy. We had about a 2-minute chat as he was trying to get out of traffic. And this is Roger Penske, for fuck's sake, you know, who is the god of IndyCar in many ways.
Were you in a car, or were you just happened to be walking next to his car?
I was walking next to his car.
Oh, that's awesome. Dude, you know what? Just a little side note on Roger Penske. Guy's a hell of a team owner, and you know all of his racing accomplishments. But hell, in the business world, he's. I think he's a good team owner. He's a hell of a businessman, even more so, tenfold. And that's I have even more respect for him as a businessman because you know he had 2 pennies to rub together maybe, and look at the empire he's turned it into.
Well, you know, everyone knows that I'm a Ganassi guy at heart, but the thing is, I respect Penske because of everything that he's done for the sport. And yes, of course, he was part of that whole thing when the split came along. I can forgive him for that because of his contribution to open wheel racing in America as a whole. And I think that's the most important part on there. And yeah, I mean, to be fair, it was a great weekend. And I have to say thank you to Jim, to Shelley, to Michael Peters, and all those people who I hang out with. And also to iRacing, actually, because they put together that deal for the Ganassi Pit Garage. But David Phillips, and you and I both know David, because we both write for iRacing News. He was out there on Thursday night drinking with the rest of us.
That's awesome. One of these days, I got to be able to get in there on a Thursday at the main event and experience what that's all about. Well, you brought up iRacing. Should we touch on the iRacing Indy 500 just for a moment? Because we got a couple guys on the stream asking what our thoughts were about the unfortunate transpirings that went on with the race.
Right. I'm going to give, again, I have to preface this, is that my opinion here is my own personal opinion. I have no information from iRacing, and this is not iRacing's personal opinion. I think that they had a similar situation to Daytona 2013 when they had a DDoS attack. Because it was weird for them to cancel the entire race. And I've got a feeling that, be it Sim Raceway or people from Forza, probably, you know, I wouldn't say they did it themselves, but I think they got some kids to try and do a DDoS attack on them because, yes, there's been issues with World Tour events before, but for them to cancel a race that hasn't even taken place yet, the Saturday race, is weird.
Yeah, it was really disappointing. I mean, man, I think anyone involved with the new release of the EW12 Dallara chassis on iRacing would say that this was the most hectic race week ever. We had 5 days to prepare for the Indy 500, 5 days to get the car into our hands, get a qualifying set going, try to qualify in the top 33. Then there was the little blunder about when should qualifying end. We thought it was over, then it was extended. More guys were bumping in and out, and then it comes time for the race. 1 second left on the clock to sign into the session, and kablamo! And then we didn't know anything.
The best food we've ever had as well. We even had Klingerman, you know, signed up to run on the Friday night race, which would have been amazing to see. You know, a proper NASCAR driver running in the iRacing Indy 500. But yeah, it was disappointing, to be fair. But I mean, iRacing, you know, they pay their dues. I mean, they didn't have to refund people; they did refund people. My only thing that I'm annoyed about is I think that they shouldn't have cancelled the Saturday race. What they should have done was say, we're going to try and run the Saturday race. If it goes wrong, we apologise in advance and at least allow it to try and run.
Yeah, I think some iRacers bring up a good point in saying that, look, iRacing tried to run the iRacing NASCAR Series Coke 600 and then the Indy 500 went off at the exact same time. You had how many people online at the exact same time hitting refresh, loading different pages or whatever? Maybe it was a, you know, whatever attack, or maybe it was just self-inflicted because there were so many people on there at once. Conspiracy theorists will say, hey, look, the NASCAR race went off without a hitch, with the Indy 500, you know,
well, it did have
was
a hitch
canceled.
in the lowest split. It was only the top split which had, and it was okay. But I do have a feeling, because there were some people in the top split that couldn't race either. I have no idea about the ins and outs of this, but perhaps there's some form of priority which is assigned to WCS drivers to make sure they get into the sessions even if things are going wrong elsewhere, in the same way that broadcast accounts, of course, that PSR TV and Racespot TV and Glacier TV have, there's a priority on them, so we can get into spectator sessions even if, general other people can't.
Yeah, that could very well be, and maybe that is the case. But I just hope, and I'm very thinly hoping, because it seems like when situations like this happen, iRacing tends to drop the ball. That's just my opinion, no one else's. They leave qualifying as it is. When and if they do decide to run the Indy 500 again, they just open up the session, say, look, we're going to run the race in 5 days. We're going to put up practice sessions so you can practice race conditions. Here's the qualifying from May, and then we're going to run the race. We're going to give you 2 splits, Friday, Saturday night, just like it was, and then hopefully it'll work out. But I think in lieu of the $6 credit that we all got, that people who bought the Dallara TW12, I wish that iRacing would have just made a promise instead that says, instead of pushing out new content, we're going to make sure we shore up our service, our system, our website to make sure that things like this don't happen again.
Well,
because
yeah,
I think you and I know
things that iRacing need, because let's not forget that Assetto Corsa, for example, have actually started doing multiplayer. Now, it's very clunky, it doesn't work very well, but I've talked to a number of people that run on R Factor, on Assetto Corsa, on iRacing, and actually the reason why iRacing is so good is because of the fact that they actually have multiplayer racing. Now, if they're going to drop the ball on that, that actually opens the door up to Assetto Corsa, in my opinion, to actually try and take over from iRacing. So it's actually that keeping the servers on top is something that is really important. Can I just say, by the way, Dave, have we ever had an advert on the Will and Dave show?
I don't believe so.
Good. Ladies and gentlemen, coming your way on the 27th of July, the ISOWC Indianapolis 500. Start time for that is be 4 p.m. GMT. All 200 laps will be live on Racespot TV. You may now talk again, Judson. Oh, actually, no. Dave can't talk. Dave can't hear me now because I've actually done something. So I had to do this. And, yeah, we're still here, Dave. I had to do something. There we are.
Are we good?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are good. We didn't hear that advert, but we are good.
Oh, yeah, I just heard music.
Yeah, that's because you love my voice.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right
after
back.
A word from our sponsor.
A word from your local station. You're watching the NFL on CBS.
You're watching IndyCar on ABC.
Yes. But yeah, we'll move on from iRacing because we could do an entire episode on the iRacing issues. And again, I have to be a little bit politically correct when I talk about iRacing, of course, because of the roles that I do on iRacing.
That's understandable.
But yeah, it was a disappointment, and yes, I did give it a 6. In fact, to be fair, there are some people that pretty much got that car, and they actually got paid for having that car because of participation credits and all that sort of things.
Will, you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
You were breaking up, so whatever you said, whatever your last sentence was on, we couldn't hear it.
Oh, okay. Well, I can still talk, and no one else can hear me again on TeamSpeak. However, I'm going to carry on talking.
We can't hear you.
Yes. I just said that I can talk, but you can't hear me. But you can hear me again. Should we move on to NASCAR?
Yes. I want to make one quick point, if I may. This has nothing to do with... I'd like to say that Ryan Norton is a jackass because he blacklisted me from his TW12 tune-up series because he's a fat idiot who has B-cup man boobs and likes to eat a lot of pizza.
I'm not allowed to comment about any iRacer, unfortunately, in such a way. I'm sorry, but...
Oh, I'm allowed, so...
Yeah, you're allowed, I'm not.
I've stated my opinion. Yeah, there's a little red X next to his session. It says tournament ineligible, and that I'm not allowed to run this race. So, in the spirit of, Ryan Norton's always talking about, I want to help people, and blah, 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 we're going to turn a new leaf, and all this other stuff, and so he blacklists me from this Pocono race. I think that's quite hilarious.
Dave, if only I had more communication, perhaps things would have been better. When I was 4,000 miles away on a MacBook.
Wait. Did someone accuse you of not saying enough about what? The ISOWC or what event?
I'll talk about that one on my fair because I'm going on to grey areas here. It's about the race that I ran of the Indy 500 in place of the Indy 500.
Oh,
You know what I mean now.
Yes. Well, I can speculate.
Yes.
Am I allowed to speculate?
Go ahead.
So, as Ryan Norton's an egotistical maniac with a criminal record, he wanted to have Monica Clara Brand replace him in the race, and there was a whole big schmozzle about that because she wasn't fast, but then he probably said something to the effects of, oh, if you don't let her in my spot, that means you're something, fill in the blanks, you're biased against me, or something of that nature. Because that's who he is. It's never his fault. Always someone else's fault. If you don't agree with him, it means you're wrong. It means you're biased against him. It's not our fault that you're a bad person at life, that you failed at life.
Again, I'm not allowed to comment on any of this. We will, however, talk about NASCAR. Because, actually, we can do this rather well, because Josh Wise has found himself a new sponsor.
Who has a new sponsor?
It's us.
We have a sponsor?
Yes. Josh
Why
Wise
have I
has a
not
new
been
sponsor. It's us.
I thought you said
iRacing, not us as in one of Dave, but yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant we got a sponsor. I'm like, how come I didn't know about
Can
this?
you imagine if we sponsored a NASCAR?
Well, we technically could if we had contributed Doge coins.
Well, I bought a T-shirt, so I technically sponsored NASCAR.
Can I still buy one of those?
Yeah, you can actually.
I think I'm gonna have to do that.
Yeah, but iRacing, of course, are a new sponsor on the Josh Wise car.
Yes, they are.
So we've got a new sponsor, and let's be honest, I think Josh Wise's story has been the epitome of everything that can be good about social media.
Yes, it is. There's no controversy involved. You know, you got a grassroots campaign, and you know what? They're backing an underfunded team who, you know, they feel is a good driver, and it's a great story. And it's nice to see that if, you know, you're a fan favorite and guys like you, that things can happen to you.
Of course, this is going to be the last race that we're actually going to get any decent coverage for, because it's the last race. And this is actually me giving a compliment to Fox, ladies and gentlemen, because it's the last race on Fox. But after this, it's the last year of NASCAR on TNT and ESPN. They're not going to give two shits about it this year.
Oh, heck no. TNT hasn't given a you-know-what about NASCAR for years. Look at all the commercials and stuff they show. They show even more commercials than I think Fox does, which
and also,
is hard to do.
The overlay last year as well? I mean,
yeah, they covered about 65% of the screen.
Yeah. I mean, they might as well have just had, overlay on top of overlay on top of overlay, and you could have had a 4x4 pixel viewing screen to actually watch the race on, because it was that pathetic. And of course, last year TNT got rid of the wide open coverage for Daytona as well, which was pissed off a lot of fans, because that was almost a tradition in NASCAR for a few years.
Yes, it was, but it probably didn't make them enough money.
I think it made them a lot of money, because you think about it. Yes, it's an advert, but an advert during a race when you actually see the entire race, I think side-by-side adverts and also in-race adverts get a lot more money than actually having your own commercial on there. I just think they marketed it completely wrong.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that TNT screwed up. I mean,
yeah.
They're the only non-sports network that's covered NASCAR since I don't know, 2000 probably.
Yeah.
So,
but
not a surprise.
Their NBA coverage, and their NBA coverage is actually pretty darn awesome. I mean, they're better than ABC in my opinion when it comes to NBA coverage.
Yeah, but they got a lot at stake with the coverage of the NBA, because not only do they show regular season games, they've got, playoff games with implications, and then between them, they've got the 40 games and 40 nights. So if they don't do a good job and people don't want to, casual fans don't want to watch these games, then they're screwed.
Yeah.
They know that there's enough NASCAR fans that are going to watch a NASCAR race no matter what, and they could sell those numbers to some, if not many, ad companies, and they'll make their money no matter how bad their coverage is.
Well, yeah. So, basically, NASCAR on TNT sucks. And this is the thing as well. Adam Alexander, he's not a bad commentator, And I listen to him. He does college football on Fox Sports 1. He's not bad at that. I just think like it's that whole thing, the same with ABC, that it's just the entire team that's wrong. You get individual people in there which are good. Of course, we've got to have the conversation about how good Kyle Petty is. But the entire thing just seems to be clunky at best.
Yeah, it's kind of like TNT just kind of pieced things together, and you randomly have Larry Mack out in some, trailer describing, cars and stuff like that, and then yeah, I appreciate the openness of Dallenbach and Petty, but they just don't mesh with Alexander really well. It's just it's like you said, 3-4 people just kind of talking on their own, and hoping it all comes together.
Hey, 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 hey.
Hey, you and I are broadcast professionals. We have our own show. I know what you're going to say before you say it. You know what I'm going to say before I say it. We have chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Chemistry is a really important thing as far as all broadcast goes, in my opinion. And I think that's something that's lacking throughout a lot of motorsports at the moment.
ABC.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you have a look at the F1 coverage, I always think, yes, David Hobbs is a great kind of commentator, a great analyst, but I don't think he works for a Diffie. Then you've also got, Will Buxton. What the fuck is he doing over there? On the UK side of things, he just wears his tight red pants and he's happy with that. But in the UK side of things as well, for example, Martin Brundle and David Croft, I don't think work well together. I actually think that Martin Brundle would have worked better with Ben Edwards, and David Coulthard would have worked better with David Croft. But unfortunately, that's the way things work. But it's that whole thing, that chemistry. And the entire thing of, broadcasting a motorsports event as well, is that you've got to remember that, broadcasters are there to tell a story at the end of the day. And, if you're not telling that story, I wouldn't say correctly, but emphatically, it just ruins the entire race for people.
Oh, yeah. I think that it's been proven time again, if you've got terrible coverage and bad commentators not telling the story properly, people are going to tune out in a hurry.
I completely agree. Actually, I had a quote. I can't find this quote anymore, but oops. Should we move on? Talk about NASCAR properly.
Yeah, Coke 600. Jimmy Johnson got his groove back, and Harvick's pit crew screwed him out of another race by leaving 2 loose tires. I don't know what else you can really say about it.
Yeah, and again, this we'll come back to this point in more detail in a moment, but does it matter?
In a small way, in my opinion, yes. Because I think Harvick knows that any chance that you give Jimmy Johnson to sniff blood out in the water and get that win and basically lock himself into the chase instead of having to... that was in his mind a little bit that he hadn't won yet. Yeah. And Harvick knows better. Harvick's a very smart guy. Back at Talladega a few years ago when you could still do tandem drafting, Harvick purposely stayed out under every caution so that Johnson could not stay out to lead laps. Yeah. Because he knew he'd go pit and push his way right back up to the front. So Harvick knows that you give Jimmy Johnson a chance, a shot at winning a race and allow him to have a race victory in that win column now. He knows he has to deal with him in the chase. And Harvick's smart enough to know that if you give Jimmy Johnson any minute chance, he could take it from you again. Harvick knows Johnson's a guy he's got to beat for the championship. And Harvick knows that his pit crew and the rest of his team all have to be on the same page, and that's not happening right now. Now, it's better that it's happening now instead of in the chase, but he's got to be a little worried that Johnson may be gaining momentum. And
he's doing it in the way that Jimmy Johnson always does. He's not always the best in the early part of the regular season, but once he gets to the chase, that's when Johnson normally shines. And
yep.
I think that you're right. The fact that now he's got a W next to his name, he's now in the chase, that Johnson can piss about for the next 10, 15 races, do whatever he needs to do, and then be prepared for the chase, and he doesn't have to worry about winning a race anymore. So you are right on that point. And I think that's the biggest story that came out of Charlotte. Jimmy Johnson won, and Jimmy Johnson is now in the chase, because before that point, he wasn't in the chase.
Exactly.
But, I mean, this is the fascinating thing, I think, about the chase schedule. Now, I hate this way that NASCAR is doing this, but it means that for people who won early on in the season, and people like Kevin Harvick, for example, they can now afford to fuck up. People like Junior as well. And Junior, let's not forget, he had some great... he had He was almost the best ever driver in the first 4 races of NASCAR, and then he fucked it up. But Junior, I think now, because he hasn't got the pressure on him, he is going to be the guy to watch in the chase. Not Harvick, not Johnson, not Busch. I think Junior is going to be the one to top.
Well, if Junior has a year like he did last year, then absolutely. But I don't know, man. Harvick's week in, week out. Harvick is in Johnson territory, in my opinion. I know it's slightly biased because I am a Harvick fan and have been since 2000. But I mean, he's constantly up front. He's constantly leading laps. He's constantly, no one else has more wins than Harvick except for Logano, who's tied with him. But at this point in time, wins are the only thing that really matter, and Harvick's at the top of the top rung right now. So we don't know what's going to happen. We got this whole different format that no one has any experience with. So, I mean, Junior's going to definitely be a threat for the championship. It's just going to be, will consistency like he had last year really matter, or are you going to have to win to guarantee yourself into the next round?
Yeah. And, of course, NASCAR, again, is it's all about the winning, because we got to get our NASCAR. We got to go winning. And I think that, Junior and W's have always been a bit of an issue. Now, Harvick can get wins, and I think that's going to give him a bit of an advantage when it comes to the chase. The same with Johnson here, to be fair. And you've got to put Johnson and Harvick in one category, put Junior in another category, because those 3 drivers, I think, are the 3 people you need to think about when it comes to chase. But, you know what? I don't remember anything else important apart from the Coke 600, apart from the fact that Danica got wrecked out, and it wasn't her fault for once. And let's be honest, she had a good first half of that race.
Yes, I will agree that she did have a good first half of the race. She did have a good race at Kansas, so maybe she is starting to pick up on some things. But when you get to the tracks where you basically, it's kind of like an IndyCar. When she gets to the tracks where you can mat it and not let off, you can be competitive.
Yeah, but she's good at Martinsville, which really confuses me.
She had one good run at Martinsville.
Yeah.
That you can't confuse that with she's good at Martinsville. Now, if she goes there in October and finishes in top 10 and then does it again next spring, then yes, you can say that. But at this point, I'm going to say no.
Okay. But, I mean, she still sucks. I mean, this year she finished at Darlington and she wasn't 5 laps down. So that's an improvement. But, Charlotte, and of course, I make that whole joke about the fact that she's got her own secret weight jacker. But she was good at Charlotte for that first half of the run. And Charlotte, Texas, Atlanta, Talladega, Daytona are, Danica Patrick tracks. And she's got the intermediate tracks locked down. She still needs to get the short tracks locked down. Things like Richmond, things like Bristol, things like... got to get them locked down.
I was surprised at her lack of performance at the road course races, because she did so well at the nationwide tracks. Now, I know the Cup car has a lot more horsepower, and that's harder to control, but I thought she would have done a lot better so far.
She wasn't good in IndyCar. That's the issue.
True, but she has road course experience. She has more road course experience than pretty much any of these Cup guys do.
But Marcus Ambrose didn't have either, and let's be honest, that Marcus Ambrose didn't win a race until 2011, when they claimed that he won a Nextel race rather than a Sprint Cup race.
Yeah, but don't forget, he would have won previously at Sonoma had he not tried to coast his car uphill.
Yes.
Anyway,
but
she has more experience at the road.
So
I feel like she should have been better.
We're gonna ignore the fact there's not gonna be any Jack Villeneuve this year because there's no Canadian road course race in the Nationwide Series, is there?
No, there will not be.
Then there's no Jack Villeneuve this year.
Nope. Oops. And everyone in the Nationwide garage rejoices. I will miss Allmendinger. He did a great job in the Penske car, winning both races that he entered, and he did a hell of a job in Mid-Ohio. Luckily, I was there to watch it. That was a great race.
It was, and I think, actually, I love the Montreal track, but Mid-Ohio for NASCAR is a better track to run on.
Oh, please let the Cup side of that hear that. Well, I know Mid-Ohio is not big enough right now with its pits and all that stuff for
Yeah.
a NASCAR Cup Series event. But maybe someday I can drive 2 hours from my house and go see a Cup race.
Well, how many pits are there at Mid-Ohio?
Well, when they jammed 40 nationwide cars onto the IndyCar pit road, they were the smallest pit boxes in NASCAR.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, there needs to be road courses in NASCARs, because I think that, Sonoma and Watkins work well. There's always been that thing of, are we going to have a chase race on a road course? There needs to be a third race at least in a NASCAR series. And I actually think that, this comes back to what I was saying earlier about momentum. I think 2 more races need to be had. One in Canada, at Montreal, and then another road course race in NASCAR to really help that series.
You know what, though? You say I would love to have 2 more road courses in the Cup Series, but who gets displaced? Because they can't add any more,
Well, yeah,
races.
that's the entire thing of the entire NASCAR schedule, is that pretty much NASCAR own half the track, and the other half the tracks they ISM, whatever days.
International Speedway Corp,
Yeah,
ISC.
ISP, that's the one.
E.
That's the one. That's the one. But I mean, what does NASCAR do? Because they're in a rough patch as it is right now, as far as the scheduling goes. They've got a lot of races that get, decent numbers, not good numbers, but decent numbers. But if they would, I think the one race up, you've got to ask the question: which race would they get rid of in the chase, and which race would they get out of the regular season? Because Fox would have to basically show one of the races in the early season. And to be honest, if I was to say anything, the race that they get rid of would probably be the first Richmond race.
Oh no, you can't get rid of short track races. If anything, NASCAR needs to. All these 1.5 mile tracks need to get cut to 1 race a year, and start switching things out there. Add more short track racing, and frankly, Talladega, none of those races need to be 500 miles. Make them all 400 miles.
Yes.
You need to have Daytona, Talladega, Bristol, Richmond, and Martinsville should have 2 races. No one else should have 2. Charlotte, my God, how many more races does Charlotte need? They have the 600, they've got the 500, they've got the All-Star race, they've got the Sprint Showdown. I mean, I know it's the hub of NASCAR, but the races are terrible there, and they've been terrible there for a long time, and it's not going to get better until NASCAR does something about the cars being able to just go full out all the time with. And adding more downforce isn't going to help things, Brian France, you moron. Go own an NFL team. Let someone else who gives a damn about NASCAR and your family take over. Please rant over.
Okay, maybe you can get rid of the first Texas race. You got what? We're having a look at the schedule right now, and I mean, you can't go to Daytona, of course. You can't go to Phoenix because Phoenix is awesome. Can't get rid of the Las Vegas race because I think that's the only one they have there. The Bristol race you can't get rid of. The Ultra Cup race you can't get rid of because that's the only one they have because they went from 2 races to 1. Then the Texas race, yes, you can get rid of. You can't get rid of Darlington because that's the only race they have. Richmond, then Talladega, then Kansas, then Charlotte. So basically, it's either going to be the Texas race, the
Kansas doesn't need 2 races.
No, it doesn't. It's a shit track.
Oh, well, that's because Sprint's headquarters are near the track, so they need to have a second race.
Yeah.
I'm so... If I could just say, I'm so frustrated as a NASCAR fan, because like I said earlier, I've watched NASCAR for 25 years. Yes, I'm only 30 years old. I've watched NASCAR for 25 years. They have done so many things to just ruin the sport and push out casual fans and just make it more and more confusing and frustrating to watch and to enjoy. Just everything they do, if they would have done the opposite, it probably would have been better.
And the Ganassi people are saying they hate the chase. So not only do they hate the chase, but I think other teams hate the chase as well. So you've got the issue there of what do you do? If you're going to drop 10 races all of a sudden, what are you going to put the races on?
Yeah. But you know what? That's probably why more people are watching IndyCar. You got a full season-long championship. There's no BS. All the points never get reset.
Nope.
You know, wins don't mean more at certain points, but not others. It's simple. Keep it simple, stupid.
We were going to talk about basketball. Yeah, basketball. Very quickly
Wait, basketball? That was a great movie.
Basketball, yeah.
That was a horrible movie, by the way.
It really was.
It's amazing that the guys that came up with South Park would have created such a horrible movie.
Yeah. We're going to talk about basketball really quickly. The Pacers suck. Disagree?
How could I disagree with that? They were supposed to be the team that was going to finally contend with the Heat. Halfway through the season, they completely imploded. Somehow stayed in the number 1 seed, God only knows how. Almost lost to the 8th seed in the first round. Then somehow got through the second round into the Eastern Conference Final, and then totally laid an egg against the Heat. And now the team's probably going to get blown up and have to start over again.
Are the Heat going to do a three-peat?
I don't see the Spurs or the Thunder beating them.
Well,
how can you beat
the
them?
Eastern Conference better than the Western Conference, and we all know that.
You know what? As a whole, the Eastern Conference is not better than the Western Conference, but at the top end where it matters, the Eastern Conference is stronger.
Anything else we need to talk about?
You know, we've put in a good hour and 20 minutes. I think we covered a lot, especially considering that we didn't have broadcasted shows for a couple weeks. I don't know what else we could talk about. I mean, I made fun of Ryan Norton. We talked about Indy, talked about NASCAR, talked about Formula 1. I think that's it.
Yep, there we are. That is episode 31 of the Will and Dave Show, apparently in the books. We're talking about things. F1, NASCAR, IndyCar, Ryan Norton, IndyCar, iRacing. We talked a lot about IndyCar, to be fair today, Dave.
We did, but that's because that of all the races, that one was the best one and deserved the most most of our time.
2 races in theory.
True.
Yeah. So we'll be back next week, 6:00 PM Eastern Time, here live on GlacierTV. Dave, anything else you want to say?
Well, I'd just like to say that you're a very good friend of mine. I'm glad you enjoyed Indy. We hope to see you in America more, and hopefully permanently at some point. If somebody thinks you're an egomaniac, they're insane. We all love you.
Well, yeah, and everyone knows that I want to come to Indy, so if you know a way of me getting a green card, then please let me know. In the meantime, however, don't forget you can check us out on Twitter. That is at Will and Dave Show. On Facebook, at Will and Dave Show as well. Holy shit, Dave, the music's finished.
Of all my podcasts, this one was the most recent.
There we are.
Gotcha, bitch!
Whoa, was that you or someone else?
That was me.
Okay.
I wanted to end on that.